Hey guys, and welcome back to Hoosier Hardware. Today we're taking a look at these 10 hard drives in front of me, and the reason is I took a little bit of a gamble on eBay, but if you're somebody that likes to buy and sell PCs, then this actually might be a gamble worth taking. So one of the most common configurations I typically sell my used PCs with is a 120 gigabyte SSD, which I usually pick up for between $15 and $20 because I'm often buying those used. I find that I very seldom actually find a good enough deal on a used one to take the risk and buy the used one over the new one. And then I usually pair it with a hard drive of some sort, whether it be a 500 gig or a 1 terabyte hard drive, depending on what I have in stock. And basically my stock comes from either buying them off of Amazon for about $20 or $25, and that's about the 500 gig ones, or I find them in the other PCs that I've been buying. A lot of the time when I buy a pre-built PC, it comes with a 1 terabyte hard drive or sometimes a 500 gigabyte hard drive, though that's often not a very reliable hard drive. You never know if you're gonna get a really loud clicky one that sounds like it's gonna die soon, or if you get one that works perfectly. Now that is where eBay enters the scene with the lots of hard drives that they have available, and there are a lot of these available. You can buy off-brand ones that are very rough condition. You can buy almost brand new ones that are just being sold out at bulk. Now I went for a lot that was advertised as 1 terabyte hard drives, 10 of them, and it was listed as brand name hard drives, which I assume would have been Seagate or Western Digital, those types of brands that are sort of the normal hard drive brands that you think of when you hear about hard drives in general. And I was absolutely right. We have 5 Western Digital ones and we have 5 Seagate ones. There were no other brands included. The Western Digital ones seem to be a little bit older in this particular lot, though they were selling several lots, so I'm sure your mileage would vary depending obviously on the seller as well as just which ones they grabbed out of the boxes. And I got 2 blues, 2 blacks, 1 green from the Western Digital side, and the Seagate ones were all pretty much identical. They're all these sort of slimmer version of hard drive, and frankly, yeah, they seem to work just fine. Now, the way I went about testing these hard drives to see if I'm comfortable putting them into a PC that I plan on selling to somebody else is basically looking at the smart information, making sure everything checks out there, and then also giving it an actual real-world test that involved copying a very large video file over to each of these hard drives, and then listening as I scrub through it to see if it's very clacky or clickety, or just sounds like it might be dying in the not too distant future, or if it operates fairly quickly when I'm sort of skipping through the file, or whether it acts very slowly. And I was pleased to see that all 10 of these hard drives did handle that file transfer at a solid transfer rate of over 400 megabytes per second. Granted, it wasn't a gigantic file size, but it was big enough to give me a sort of glimpse at what type of read speeds we're going to see out of these drives, as well as when scrubbing through this large video file, I also did see pretty solid performance and very comparable performance from all 10 of these drives. Now, the sticky notes I stuck on each of these drives has to do with how I graded it personally, and I did a few things beyond checking to make sure the smart information was okay, and beyond listening to it, which I would give it sort of a noise rating, whether it be near silent, quiet, or a little bit clicky. I also then looked at any lifetime information that was available. Now, for some of these Seagate drives, I actually was able to see how many terabytes of data had been written throughout the lifespan, but for a lot of these Western Digital drives, I was stuck with basically just the manufacture date, and I put whatever information there that I had available to me. So going through some of these, just so you kind of have an idea of what I was looking at here, the 2 blue drives, all I had for lifetime information was that they were from 2013, they were both nearly silent, and they both checked out okay. In fact, all 10 of these drives checked out perfectly fine on the smart information, so the blue drives got an A rating from me. Now, the 2 Caviar black drives were a little bit different. The first one was manufactured in 2010, smart okay status, and it was near silent, so it also got an A rating. Now, the second black drive here actually got a B grade, and yes, I do realize that they're completely arbitrary grades that I went through with these, but it checked out okay with the smart information. It was manufactured in 2010, but it was a little bit clicky when dropping a new file onto it and then when scrubbing around on that video file. So I did give it a B grade just because it was audible. However, I doubt that in a case it would be seriously audible. It wasn't like some of them that I had in the past that were sort of audible from clear across the house. By the way, that was an exaggeration, but this thing was just barely audible in a case probably not so much. Now, the green drive actually got the lowest rating of all 10 of these drives, and that's because it was manufactured in 2008, and it was mostly quiet, but definitely the loudest of all of these hard drives. So I gave it a C grade, and it's just loud enough to the point where I might hesitate a little bit to put it into a PC I was offloading. However, if I come across a PC that's a very budget build and is definitely presenting really good value for the performance it's giving, then this drive may make its way into that. All things else aside, it did perform just fine in the testing that I threw at it. It's just a little bit louder than I really like from a hard drive, though. Once it's inside a case, it's likely still audible, just a little bit quiet. So now the hard drives I was actually most concerned about were these Seagate drives, but fortunately for this lot, the Seagate drives were all produced a little bit more recently than these Western Digital ones, so they all actually checked out really well. The worst performer of the bunch had a use time of 473 days. That was about all the information I had on the lifetime from this one. Everything checked out with the smart information, and it was just barely audible, so I did give it a B grade. Though of the two B grade drives, this is the one I think that is the better of the two between the Seagate and the Western Digital Black drive. I think this one would be more like a B plus if I was really getting down to it and assigning very arbitrary grades just to rank them. And moving on, then we have two drives that are very, very similar in their sound as well as the smart status. These both get A grades. The big difference here is this one has over 74,000 terabytes to its name of written data. Now, of course, I don't know how necessarily accurate all of the data, the smart information is, but it does list as over 74,000 terabytes of data written to it. So it's definitely an older, so maybe an A minus for that just based on its vast amount of usage. This other one only has 102 terabytes written to it. So this gets an A grade. This is a really quiet drive and also doesn't have that much usage on it. Now, the last two drives in the bunch were my favorites just because they were the quietest drives of the bunch. Obviously, the smart information checked out, and most importantly, they had the least amount of write cycles on them. Both of these drives were between 50 and 60 terabytes, one with about 58, the other with 53. So I gave them A plus ratings because they were pretty much silent drives, and they have very limited usage on them, at least as far as these hard drives go. So I am very comfortable throwing those in builds to be sold off. But when it all comes down to it, I'm actually comfortable throwing all 10 of these hard drives into builds, provided, with the exception of the green one, that it's a system that I think is worth having a 1 terabyte drive in it. The green one's the only one I would actually hesitate just a little bit on. Like I said, I'd probably throw it into a build that maybe has a little bit better price to performance to it, so I don't feel quite as bad about putting a little bit of a sketchy hard drive in it. Now, one of the things I do tell a lot of my customers when I'm dropping these computers off to them or when they're coming to pick them up is, look, if something goes wrong, especially in the first 30 days, then I'm happy to help out. I'm happy to replace it, especially a hard drive like these where I don't necessarily know how much usage they've had. If they had a hard drive die within about 30 days, I would be more than happy to swap out hard drives, which is also one of the reasons I feel a little bit more comfortable putting one of these in a system, because this hard drive may be good for years to come, or it may die tomorrow. It's really impossible to tell, but everything checks out with it. It's just a little bit noisier than I would like. But like I said, not the loudest hard drive I've ever had. And at a 10 for 10 rating, at a $100 purchase for 10 1 terabyte hard drives, this is a fantastic price to performance gain for me, because as I acquire some of these PCs, as I get some of these pre-builts that don't have any storage in them whatsoever, I can always drop one of these hard drives in it. And what I basically have here is a $10 per 1 terabyte hard drive, which is way better than anything I was putting in systems beforehand. Now, SSDs are a little bit harder to come by on places like eBay, at least in bulk. Hard drives are fairly easy and fairly standard to see, so if this is something you're interested in looking into, I've had good experience with this one case. Now, your mileage may vary drastically, and packaging will probably matter quite a bit. I had a box that was just completely full of bubble wrap. Then each hard drive itself here was wrapped in a little bit of bubble wrap as well. So these drives were packaged fairly well for the trip over with USPS. Obviously, with each seller, there's going to be a different method, but I was very happy with this, and this is going to serve me for a good long while because, frankly, I don't sell that many computers, and this basically just gives me a good stock of 1 terabyte drives that I can just drop in a new system and be good to go. But, of course, I do like to kick it back to you guys. What do you think about buying hard drives in bulk, especially if you're somebody that has bought hard drives in bulk in the past? what's been your sort of experience with these used drives and shipping methods, all those sorts of things that may apply to buying used hard drives, which definitely is a risky thing to do when you're putting together a PC. Obviously it worked out here, hopefully it did for you as well, but let me know regardless in those comments down below. If you like the video, give it a like, share, subscribe, comment, all very helpful to the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware, and as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.